What if everything we thought we knew about our ancient past was wrong? What if, hidden beneath generations of quiet earth, lay a secret so profound, so monumental, that it forces us to rewrite history? For centuries, we've imagined our earliest ancestors as simple, scattered groups focused purely on survival. Small fires, basic shelters, a constant struggle against the elements. But imagine a discovery that shatters that image. Picture this: a routine survey, an ordinary patch of land, until ground-penetrating radar begins to whisper of something extraordinary beneath the surface. Something immense, something structured, something ancient. And then the first glimpse.
Oh my goodness.
Not a broken shard,
Incredible.
not a scattered bone, but massive preserved timbers. Not random, deliberate, arranged with a precision that defies belief for its age. This isn't just a find, this is the find. A colossal ancient structure lying dormant for 6 millennia that predates even Stonehenge by nearly 1,000 years. It suggests a civilization far more sophisticated, far more organized than we ever dared to imagine.
Who were these people? What incredible purpose drove them to build something so ambitious, so enormous, so long ago? And what other secrets lie buried beneath our feet, waiting to challenge everything we thought we knew? Stay with us as we delve
Into the shocking new archaeological discovery that's rewriting the story of ancient Britain. In the quiet, often overlooked corners of our modern world, history lies patiently waiting. Sometimes it takes a deliberate archaeological expedition to unearth its secrets. Other times it's a whisper from the ground, a subtle anomaly picked up by cutting-edge technology that initiates a chain of events leading to revelations that redefine our understanding of the past. Our story begins not with a grand quest for a lost city, but with precisely such a whisper, an unexpected anomaly on the seemingly unremarkable farmlands of an undisclosed location in Scotland. It was late spring, early May 2024, a time when the Scottish fields were bursting with life, yet held no visible hint of the monumental secrets hidden beneath their verdant surface. A routine land survey was underway, commissioned ahead of a proposed infrastructure development. These surveys, often mundane affairs, involve meticulously mapping geological features and identifying any potential environmental concerns. But on this particular stretch of land, nestled somewhere within the rolling lowlands, the survey team encountered something that was anything but routine. The initial findings were subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, a technology that sends radar pulses into the ground and detects the reflections from subsurface structures, began to show peculiar patterns. Instead of the expected natural geological variations, the GPR readouts displayed distinct, symmetrical anomalies. These weren't the chaotic, organic shapes of buried rocks or ancient riverbeds. These were straight lines, sharp angles, and rectangular outlines, patterns indicative of human design. The anomalies were large, far larger than any typical agricultural feature or known historical settlement in the immediate vicinity. The lead geophysicist, Dr. Hilaire Vance, a veteran of countless surveys, felt a prickle of unease, then a surge of excitement. "It just didn't look natural," she would later recount in an interview. The sheer regularity of the signals suggested something deliberately constructed, and the scale was truly baffling. Dr. Vance immediately flagged the site for further investigation. It wasn't long before a team of archaeologists, led by the distinguished Professor Alistair Finch from the University of Edinburgh, arrived on the scene. Professor Finch, known for his cautious yet insightful approach to new discoveries, initially maintained a healthy skepticism. Many GPR anomalies turn out to be nothing more than unusual geological formations or modern debris. However, the persistence and clarity of the signals soon convinced him that this site warranted exploratory trenches. The first shovel hit the earth in early June. The team worked methodically, carefully removing thin layers of topsoil, their excitement building with each passing day. The initial trenches revealed nothing but undisturbed earth, maintaining the suspense. Then, on a bright, breezy afternoon, a young field archaeologist named Chloe Sharma called out, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Professor, you need to see this!" Beneath approximately a meter of accumulated soil, the team uncovered the first undeniable evidence of something extraordinary. It wasn't pottery or tools or even a foundation stone. It was wood. Not splintered fragments, but a massive, dark, almost perfectly preserved timber beam. The archaeologists trained to handle such moments with scientific rigor found themselves momentarily stunned. They carefully brushed away the surrounding soil, revealing more of the beam. It was incredibly dense, clearly oak, and bore marks that could only have been made by human tools. The moment we saw the first full length of timber emerge, untouched for millennia, Professor Finch later reflected, it was truly humbling. You're touching something that someone crafted and placed there 6,000 years ago. It's an immediate, visceral connection to the past. As more dirt was cleared, the scale of the find began to reveal itself. This wasn't a single beam. It was part of a meticulously arranged series of timbers. These ancient wooden elements, remarkably preserved in the anaerobic conditions of the Scottish soil, were clearly structural. They formed a cohesive, rectangular pattern, indicating a monumental building project. The excitement among the team was palpable, a quiet hum of scientific exhilaration. Word of the discovery began to spread beyond the immediate archaeological community, whispers reaching other institutions, attracting the attention of experts from across Britain and beyond. Everyone sensed they were on the cusp of something truly significant. What truly astonished the archaeologists was not just the presence of such well-preserved timber, but its sheer size and the precision of its arrangement. Further excavation revealed a vast rectangular footprint, stretching an astounding 40 meters in length and 12 meters in width. This was not a modest dwelling or a simple communal hut. This was a colossal structure, unlike anything previously recorded in Britain from such an early period. To put that into perspective, imagine a building roughly the size of a modern Olympic swimming pool, constructed not with steel and concrete, but with massive oak timbers by people living at the very dawn of settled agriculture. Dr. Eleanor Vance, now fully immersed in the on-site investigation, stood gazing at the emerging framework, a sense of wonder washing over her. The GPR data gave us a hint, but actually seeing these timbers, the sheer scale, the planning involved, it challenges every preconception we had about early Neolithic capabilities, she mused. These weren't just skilled builders, they were master architects and engineers for their time. The timbers themselves were impressive. Each beam, meticulously selected and shaped from mature oak trees, showed clear evidence of careful craftsmanship. Stone tool marks were still visible on their surfaces, testaments to the incredible labor and skill involved in felling, shaping and positioning these massive elements without the aid of metal tools or complex machinery. The structural integrity of the arrangement was equally astonishing. The oak posts were evenly spaced, set at consistent depths into the ground, indicating a sophisticated understanding of load-bearing principles and architectural planning. This was not a hastily erected structure. It was a carefully designed and expertly executed piece of monumental architecture. The sheer organization required to achieve this level of construction pointed to a highly structured society, capable of coordinating immense communal labor and possessing a shared vision. As the discovery gained national media attention, the quiet Scottish farmland transformed into a buzzing hub of activity. Historians and archaeologists arrived from across the UK and Europe, eager to witness the unfolding mystery. Early academic discussions revolved around the potential purpose of such a grand structure. Was it a ceremonial hall, a place of communal feasting, a tribal meeting point, or perhaps a combination of all three? The sheer size indicated it was designed to accommodate a large number of people, suggesting a central role in the social and spiritual life of the ancient community. But perhaps the most significant initial revelation came from the first preliminary radiocarbon dating of the timber. Samples sent to specialist laboratories confirmed what many had suspected, yet dared not fully believe. The oak timbers dated back to approximately 4000 BC. This date sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. It placed the construction of this massive timber hall firmly in the early Neolithic period, a full millennium before the earliest phases of Stonehenge, and centuries prior to other well-known monumental sites like Avebury or the Ness of Brodgar. "This is a game-changer," declared Professor Finch during a press conference held at the site. "For so long, we've viewed the early Neolithic in Britain as a period of transition, with communities just beginning to experiment with agriculture, living in relatively small, scattered settlements. This discovery, this colossal timber hall, forces us to completely re-evaluate that narrative. It suggests a level of social complexity, communal organization, and architectural ambition that we simply didn't believe existed at this early stage." The implications were profound. Until now, the dominant historical narrative painted early Neolithic Britons as subsistence farmers, struggling to establish a foothold in a new way of life. Large-scale communal endeavors, particularly those involving monumental construction, were typically attributed to later Neolithic and Bronze Age societies, culminating in the stone circles and henges we are familiar with today. But here, buried beneath tranquil fields, was irrefutable evidence of a sophisticated community that had successfully marshaled its resources, organized its people, and conceived of, then executed, a building project of truly impressive proportions. The timber hall wasn't merely old, it was demonstrably older and arguably more complex in its original construction method than many later stone monuments, which, while impressive, often relied on moving pre-existing megaliths rather than shaping and integrating complex timber frameworks. The people who built this structure were not just surviving, they were thriving, collaborating, and creating. They were building something for a future they could only envision, a testament to their deep connection to the land and each other. And, as the sun set over the emerging timber framework, casting long shadows across the archaeological trenches, the site hummed with a different kind of energy. The initial shock of discovery was giving way to a more profound sense of wonder and curiosity. Who were these architects of the distant past? What was life like in their society? And most importantly, what was the grand purpose of this awe-inspiring timber hall, abandoned and forgotten for thousands of years, only to be accidentally resurrected in our time? The answers, archaeologists knew, would not only fill gaps in our history, but fundamentally challenge the very foundations of it. The stage was set for a deeper exploration into the lives and legacy of Britain, his earliest monumental builders. The initial shock of a discovery is a powerful, fleeting moment. It's the thrill of the unknown made real. But what follows is perhaps even more compelling, the slow, meticulous process of understanding. As the archaeologists expanded their excavation, moving from exploratory trenches to a full-scale dig, the true anatomy of this 6,000-year-old monument began to emerge. The site was no longer just a collection of ancient timbers. It was a blueprint, a ghost of a colossal building that spoke volumes about the ingenuity and ambition of its creators. As the full footprint of the structure was painstakingly uncovered, its immense scale continued to astound everyone involved. Measuring approximately 40 meters long by 12 meters wide, the hall was a testament to monumental vision. To truly grasp this, imagine standing at one end and looking down a length greater than 6 double-decker buses parked end to end. The interior space would have been cavernous, dwarfing any domestic dwelling of the era and rivaling the nave of a small medieval church. This was not a building for a single family or a small clan. It was conceived and built for the community, a stage for grand events. The very foundation of this architectural marvel was the timber itself. A closer analysis revealed that the builders had exclusively chosen mature oak trees. This was no accident. Oak is a hardwood known for its incredible density and durability, but it is also notoriously difficult to work with, especially with the tools available in 4000 BC. The choice of oak signaled a desire for permanence and strength. These builders were not just creating a temporary shelter, they were erecting a legacy. Microscopic analysis of the timbers revealed the distinct, scalloped marks left by polished stone axes and adzes. Imagine the sheer physical effort. Teams of people felling giant, centuries-old oaks, painstakingly shaping them into uniform posts and beams, and then transporting them to the construction site, all without the aid of wheels or beasts of burden. The precision of the joinery, hinted at by notches and carefully shaped ends, suggested a sophisticated understanding of woodworking that archaeologists had previously thought developed much later. The layout of the hall was defined by a series of massive, upright oak posts set into deep, deliberately dug post holes. These formed two long parallel rows that would have served as the main load-bearing supports for the roof. Inside this outer frame, a second inner set of even larger posts suggested a central aisle, a common feature in later European longhouses but astonishing to find in a structure of this age in Britain. Professor Finch's team meticulously mapped every post hole, noting their precise alignment and uniform depth. This systematic arrangement was clear evidence of a pre-existing architectural plan. Someone, or some group, had designed this hall before the first tree was ever felled. They had a blueprint, likely memorized and passed down through tradition, that dictated every aspect of the construction. As the excavation moved inward, from the structural perimeter to the earthen floor of the hall, the story became even more vivid. The archaeologists began to uncover features that spoke not just of how the hall was built, in which the people inside it lived. The most significant of these were the central hearths. Down the main axis of the building, they found several large, stone-lined pits, their surrounding earth blackened and hardened by millennia-old fires. These were not small domestic cooking fires. They were enormous hearths, strategically placed and clearly designed to provide light, warmth, and a focal point for large gatherings. The sheer amount of charcoal and ash suggested they were used frequently and burned with great intensity. One can easily imagine these fires roaring to life, casting flickering shadows across the faces of hundreds of people gathered within the smoky, atmospheric interior. Scattered around these central hearths, the floor was a treasure trove of archaeological clues. Thousands of fragments of early Neolithic pottery were unearthed. The style was consistent, simple, elegant, dark-fired pots, yet many bore incised decorations, geometric patterns etched into the clay before firing. This wasn't just utilitarian ware for cooking, it was serviceware, suggesting the preparation and serving of food and drink on a grand scale. The presence of such a vast quantity of pottery confirmed this was a place of consumption, a place for feasting. This theory was powerfully reinforced by the discovery of an immense number of animal bones. Faunal analysis, the study of these remains, painted a picture of epic-scale consumption. The bones were predominantly from cattle and pigs, the prime livestock of the Neolithic farmer. Crucially, the analysis showed they were from young, healthy animals, the best of the herd. Furthermore, the butchery marks on the bones indicated that entire carcasses were being brought into the hall, butchered and cooked on site. This wasn't about daily subsistence, it was about conspicuous consumption, a grand display of wealth and community prosperity. These were the remnants of massive feasts, prehistoric barbecues, where entire communities would come together to reaffirm social bonds, celebrate harvests, or commemorate important events. The sheer volume of feasting debris was staggering, suggesting the hall was a vibrant, active center of social life for generations. Further details of the interior emerged as the team carefully scraped away layers of the compacted earth floor. They found subtle grooves and a series of smaller, shallower post holes running perpendicular to the main axis of the hall. This was compelling evidence of internal partitions. It seemed the vast open space could be subdivided into smaller zones or rooms, perhaps using wattle and daub screens or suspended animal hides. This added a new layer of complexity to the hall's function. Were these smaller spaces for storage? Were they private areas for chieftains or elders? Or were they designated for specific ritual activities? The mystery of their exact purpose remains, but their existence proves the hall was a dynamic, adaptable space, not just a single, monolithic chamber. With the foundations, post holes, and floor features mapped, the team could begin to visualize the structure as it once stood. The massive oak posts would have supported an equally massive roof. While the roof itself is long gone, its form can be inferred. The arrangement of the posts suggests a steeply pitched roof, necessary to shed the heavy Scottish rain. It was likely a masterpiece of timber engineering in its own right, a complex lattice of rafters and beams, all held together with sophisticated joinery. The roofing material itself was almost certainly thatch, layers of reeds or turf that would have made the structure weatherproof and well insulated. Now try to imagine it. Picture stepping out of the wind and rain of Neolithic Scotland and passing through a formidable wooden entrance into this great hall. The air inside is thick with wood smoke from the roaring central fires. The sheer scale of the space is awe-inspiring. The massive oak columns, like the trunks of ancient trees, soar upwards into the smoky darkness of the high-pitched roof. The flickering firelight illuminates hundreds of faces, people talking, eating, laughing. The smell of roasting meat hangs in the air, mingling with the scent of damp earth and burning oak. Voices echo in the vast chamber, creating a communal hum of life and activity. This wasn't just a building. It was the heart of a society. It was a cathedral of timber, a center of power, community, and belief, built to impress, to unite, and to endure. The careful deconstruction of its remains had revealed not just a building plan, but a window into the very soul of a lost community. The next question was undeniable. Who were these remarkable people? Who were the builders of Britain's first great monument? A monument of such staggering scale and sophistication does not simply spring from the earth. It is born from the minds and hands of people. It is a reflection of their society, their beliefs, and their place in the world. Having meticulously uncovered the architectural blueprint of the Great Timber Hall, archaeologists were now faced with the most profound question of all. Who were these people? Who were the master builders of 4000 BC? With no written records to guide them, writing would not arrive in Britain for another 3,500 years, the answers had to be pieced together from the silent testimony of the artifacts, the bones, and the very soil itself. To understand the builders, we must first understand their world. The year 4000 BC places them at the dawn of one of the most significant transformations in human history, the Neolithic Revolution. For millennia prior, the inhabitants of Britain were Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. They were nomadic, moving in small bands across the landscape, following the seasonal migrations of animals and the ripening of wild plants. Their lives were intimately tied to the rhythms of the natural world, but their ability to build permanent monumental structures was limited by their transient lifestyle. Around the 4th millennium BC, a wave of change that had begun in the Near East thousands of years earlier finally reached the shores of Britain. New people, new ideas, and new technologies arrived from continental Europe, bringing with them the revolutionary practices of farming, They brought domesticated wheat and barley and herded cattle, pigs and sheep. This was not merely a change in diet, it was a fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with the land. For the first time, people could settle in one place, cultivate crops and build permanent communities. This transition from a nomadic to a settled existence was the very foundation upon which the Great Hall was built. The people who built this hall were among Britain's first farmers. Their daily lives would have been governed by the agricultural calendar, planting in the spring, tending the crops through the summer, and harvesting in the autumn. Archaeological evidence from other nearby sites paints a vivid picture of their settlements. They lived in clusters of rectangular timber houses, not unlike a miniature version of the Great Hall itself, with walls of woven wattle plastered with daub, a mix of clay, soil and straw, and warm, weatherproof roofs of thatch. Life was a blend of the new and the old. While their fields provided a reliable source of food, they would have supplemented their diet by hunting deer and wild boar in the dense surrounding forests and foraging for berries, nuts and roots. They were skilled craftspeople. The women likely transformed clay from local riverbeds into the beautiful, decorated pottery found within the hall, while the men fashioned formidable tools from stone. Using fine-grained rock, they would grind and polish it for days to create incredibly sharp and durable axe heads, essential for clearing the ancient forests for farming and for shaping the massive timbers used in their constructions. These were the very tools whose marks were left on the hall's beams, a direct, tangible link to the hands that made them. However, the old image of these early farmers as simple, isolated groups struggling for survival is utterly shattered by the existence of the Great Timber Hall. A project of this magnitude would have been impossible without a highly organized and collaborative society. The construction would have required a level of planning, resource management, and coordinated labor that speaks to a complex social structure. First, there must have been leadership, whether it was a powerful hereditary chieftain, a council of respected elders from several villages, or a charismatic shaman. Someone had to have the authority to conceive of such a project and mobilize the workforce. This leader would have been responsible for everything from selecting the site and designing the structure to organizing the felling of hundreds of oak trees and managing the food supply for the workers. Second, the hall is a testament to immense collaboration. A single small village could not have built this alone. The sheer manpower required suggests that multiple communities from across the region came together, pooling their resources and labor for a shared purpose. This implies a network of alliances and a shared cultural identity that transcended individual settlements. The massive feasts that took place within the completed hall were likely a crucial mechanism for maintaining these social bonds, a way of repaying labor debts and reinforcing a sense of collective identity. The hall was, in essence, the capital of a tribal federation, a central place where disparate groups could come together and become one people. This level of social organization was not happening in a vacuum. Similar, though often smaller, timber longhouses and communal enclosures were being built across northern Europe during the same period, from the Netherlands to Germany and southern Scandinavia. The builders of the Scottish Hall were not isolated pioneers. They were part of a widespread cultural phenomenon, a pan-European movement of monument building that accompanied the spread of agriculture. They shared ideas, technologies, and perhaps even beliefs with their distant cousins across the water. This leads us to their spiritual world. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to build this hall? Its purpose was clearly more than just a practical meeting place. Like the great cathedrals of a later age, its monumental scale was designed to inspire awe. It was a statement, a declaration of this community's power, permanence, and connection to the land they now called home. In a world without written laws or formal borders, this structure was a physical manifestation of their identity and their claim to the territory. During the Neolithic period, there was a growing emphasis on ancestors and lineage. Across Britain, communities began constructing elaborate communal tombs, earthen barrows and stone cairns, to house the remains of their dead. These tombs were powerful symbols of continuity, linking the living to the generations that came before them. The Great Timber Hall can be seen as a parallel concept, a monumental house for the living. It was a place where the community's spirit was anchored, where traditions were passed down, where marriages were arranged, and where the important rituals that marked the passing of the seasons and the cycle of life and death were performed. Standing inside its vast, smoky interior, surrounded by their kin, these early farmers would have felt a profound sense of belonging to something much larger than themselves. These were not the simple, primitive people of our outdated history books. The builders of the Great Hall were visionaries and innovators. They were a dynamic, organized, and deeply connected society, standing on the threshold of a new age. They possessed the technical skill, the social cohesion, and the sheer ambition to transform their world and to leave behind a monument that would endure in secret for 6 millennia. They didn't just build a hall, they built a new kind of society. The next mystery to unravel was the very heart of their creation. What exactly was the grand purpose of this magnificent timber cathedral? What specific events and ceremonies took place within its hallowed walls? A structure of such epic proportions, built with such immense effort and skill, begs the most fundamental question: why? What drove these early Neolithic communities to invest generations of labor and resources into creating this colossal timber hall? The answer, archaeologists now believe, is not a single one. This was not merely a shelter or a meeting place. It was a multifunctional megastructure, the vibrant, beating heart of their entire society. By examining the clues left behind on its ancient floor, we can begin to reconstruct the ceremonies, the politics, and the celebrations that once filled this magnificent space. The most direct and overwhelming piece of evidence points to one primary function. The Great Hall was a feasting hall. As we've seen, the sheer volume of animal bones and pottery fragments is staggering, but it's the quality of these remains that tells the real story. The bones belong to the finest, youngest cattle and pigs, animals that would have been the community's most valuable assets. This was not about simple daily sustenance. This was about extravagant, planned events. A feast in the Neolithic world was so much more than a meal, explains Professor Alistair Finch. It was the social glue that held everything together. It was a display of prosperity and success, a way for leaders to demonstrate their ability to provide for their people. It was also a way to create and solidify alliances, with guest communities being treated to lavish hospitality that created social obligations. In a very real sense, the politics of the time were conducted over a roasting fire. Imagine the scene: hundreds of people from across the region gathered under the great timber roof. The central hearths blaze, illuminating the vast smoky chamber. The air is thick with the smell of roasting meat, as entire carcasses are cooked and shared. Ornate pottery vessels are passed around, perhaps filled with a simple ale brewed from their barley crops. These feasts would have been loud, vibrant, and essential. They were where news was exchanged, where marriages were brokered between different groups, and where the sense of a shared, collective identity was forged and reinforced generation after generation. The hall was the stage for the most important social theatre of their time. Beyond the celebration, the hall's sheer scale and centrality strongly suggest it served as an administrative and political hub. In a society without palaces or forts, a monumental building like this becomes the de facto seat of power. This was almost certainly where the community's leaders, be they a council of elders or a single powerful chieftain, would gather to make the decisions that shaped their world. It was here that disputes over land or livestock would have been settled, and where justice was dispensed. It was here that they would have planned great communal projects, from clearing new farmland to organizing the workforce to repair the hall itself. The authority of the leaders would have been amplified by their surroundings. Making a judgment or proclaiming a decision inside this immense, awe-inspiring structure would have given it a weight and solemnity it could never have had in a simple hut. The hall was a symbol of the collective's power and, by extension, the power of those chosen to lead it. It was, in effect, the first parliament of ancient Britain, a place where the course of the community was debated and decided. Furthermore, it's impossible to separate the practical from the spiritual in the Neolithic mind. The hall was undoubtedly a deeply sacred and ceremonial space. The cycles of life and death, the turning of the seasons, and the success of the harvest were all believed to be governed by forces that needed to be honored and appeased. The great hall would have been the primary temple for these beliefs. The central hearths were not just for cooking, they were sacred fires connecting the earthly community to the spiritual world. It is highly likely that the most important rites of passage were conducted here. Imagine a young person coming of age in a ceremony held in the flickering firelight, or a couple from different villages being joined in marriage before the assembled community, their union symbolizing a new alliance. Funerary rites, too, may have begun in the hall, with the community gathering to feast and honor the deceased before their remains were carried to the great communal tombs on a nearby hillside. Major seasonal festivals would have been pivotal. The winter solstice, with its promise of the sun's return, or the harvest festival giving thanks for the earth's bounty, would have been marked by days of ritual feasting and celebration within these walls, reaffirming the cosmic order and the community as place within it. Finally, a place that drew so many people together would have inevitably become an economic and cultural nexus. The Great Hall was not just an isolated monument, it was the central node in a regional network. People traveling to the hall for a feast or a ceremony would have brought things with them to trade. A farmer might bring a surplus of grain to exchange for a beautifully crafted polished stone axe head, the stone for which had been quarried many miles away. Exotic items like shimmering seashells from the distant coast or unique pottery styles from another region would have found their way here, making the hall a vibrant marketplace of goods and ideas. It may also have been a center for specialized craft production. The sheer consistency and quality of the pottery suggest that skilled artisans may have had dedicated areas to work, perhaps under the patronage of the community's leadership. The hall was a place where new technologies, new artistic styles, and new ways of thinking could be shared and disseminated across the entire region. It was an engine of culture and innovation. In the end, the genius of the Great Timber Hall lies not in a single purpose, but in its masterful integration of all these functions. It was a feasting hall, a parliament, a cathedral, and a marketplace, all under one colossal roof. The political meeting was sanctified by a religious ritual, which was then sealed by a communal feast, which was made possible by the economic prosperity of the trade network it fostered. Each function reinforced the others, creating a powerful, self-sustaining center for the society that built it. It was the anchor of their world, a place of immense practical importance and profound symbolic meaning. For centuries, it stood as a testament to their success. It was the center of everything, which makes its ultimate fate all the more mysterious. If this hall was so vital, so central to their very existence, why was it abandoned? Why did this vibrant heart of Neolithic life fall silent, eventually disappearing from memory and from the landscape itself, leaving only its ghost behind? For centuries, the Great Timber Hall stood as the undeniable center of its world. It was a place of power, a hub of community, a sacred stage for the rituals that bound its people together. Its construction was a statement of permanence, a testament to a thriving and organized society. and yet it fell silent. After generations of feasts, councils, and ceremonies, the fires in its great hearths were extinguished for the last time. The vibrant heart of this Neolithic community ceased to beat. The most perplexing question facing the archaeologists is not how it was built, or even why, but why it was abandoned. What could possibly lead a community to turn its back on such a vital and monumental creation? The archaeological record offers no simple answer, no single catastrophic event. Instead, it presents a series of tantalizing clues that have given rise to several compelling theories. The first, and perhaps the most intriguing, is that the hall was not simply abandoned to decay, but was deliberately and ritually decommissioned. In this scenario, the end of the hall's life was not a moment of failure, but a final, powerful ceremony. Archaeologists have found evidence at similar prehistoric sites of what appears to be a closing feast, a final, massive gathering that dwarfs all previous ones. A distinct layer in the soil at the Scottish site, dense with an unusually high concentration of pottery shards and animal bones, hints at just such an event. It is possible that the community held one last magnificent feast to honor the spirit of the place. Following this, the structure itself was given a ceremonial burial. This may have involved the partial dismantling of the posts or even a great, deliberate fire. Imagine the spectacle, the entire community gathered at a distance, watching as the structure that had defined their lives for generations was consumed in a colossal funeral pyre, a blazing beacon in the night sky. Why would they do this? In the Neolithic worldview, buildings, like people, may have been seen as having a life cycle. The hall may have simply reached the end of its perceived lifespan. Alternatively, its existence might have been tied to a specific dynasty of leaders. Upon the death of a particularly powerful chieftain or a revered priestess, the hall, as the embodiment of their power, had to be retired with them, making way for a new leader to build a new monument. In this light, the abandonment was not an end, but a transformation, a sacred act that closed one chapter and prepared the way for the next. A second, more pragmatic theory points to environmental change. The society that built the Great Hall was underpinned by a successful agricultural economy. Their ability to produce a surplus of food was the very foundation of their social and political power. But the climate of 4000 BC was not stable. Paleoclimatological data from across northern Europe shows that this period was subject to significant fluctuations. A prolonged shift towards a colder, wetter climate could have been disastrous, leading to repeated crop failures and a decline in the health of their livestock. If the agricultural surplus vanished, the great feasts could no longer be held. The social glue would dissolve. The leadership's authority, built on their ability to provide, would crumble. Faced with famine and hardship, the large, centralized community may have been forced to break apart into smaller, more mobile groups, returning to a lifestyle focused purely on survival. In this scenario, the hall was not abandoned in a single act, but gradually fell into disuse as its very reason for being withered away. Supporting this idea, archaeologists are meticulously analyzing soil cores from the site, searching for changes in ancient pollen that could indicate a dramatic shift in vegetation and climate. The exhaustion of local resources is another possibility. Felling hundreds of mature oaks to build and maintain the hall, alongside the constant demand for firewood for the great hearths, could have led to localized deforestation, driving the community to seek new, more wooded territories. The third major theory is one of social upheaval. Societies are not static. They evolve, they fracture, and they are reborn. The centralized hierarchical society represented by the hall may have simply run its course. New beliefs or ideologies may have arisen, challenging the authority of the traditional leaders and the rituals performed in the Great Hall. A new generation might have rejected the old ways, opting for a different social structure or a new ceremonial focus. Conflict, too, cannot be ruled out. While often imagined as a peaceful era, the Neolithic was not without its tensions. Competition for prime agricultural land and resources could easily have flared into warfare between rival tribal federations. As the ultimate symbol of its community's power and prosperity, the Great Hall would have been a prime target. While the current excavation has not yet revealed definitive evidence of conflict, like a defensive palisade or weapon-related trauma on human remains, the possibility remains. It's equally plausible that the conflict was internal. The immense strain of maintaining the hall and providing for the great feasts could have fractured the very alliances it was meant to cement. Resentment and rivalry may have torn the community apart from within, leading to the hall's ultimate collapse as a functioning center. The truth is likely a complex tapestry woven from threads of all these theories. Perhaps a period of environmental hardship exacerbated social tensions, leading to a crisis of faith in the old leadership. This could have culminated in a final dramatic act of ritual closure, a decision to end an era and start anew. What is clear is that the abandonment was total. The site shows little evidence of later occupation. The hall was not repurposed or rebuilt. It was left to the elements, its great timbers slowly rotting and collapsing, the earth gradually reclaiming it, burying its memory under layers of soil and silence for 60 centuries. The mystery of its ending is as compelling as that of its beginning. It serves as a powerful reminder that even the greatest monuments of human achievement are fragile, their existence dependent on the delicate balance of belief, prosperity, and peace. The fall of the Great Timber Hall was not just the end of a building, it was the end of an era, the closing of a world. But it was not the end of monumental ambition in Britain. As the memory of wood faded, a new age of stone was dawning on the horizon. For generations, the great stone circles of Stonehenge and Avebury have dominated our vision of the ancient past. They stand as enduring symbols of prehistoric ambition, their colossal stones seeming to represent the very dawn of monumental architecture in Britain. But the discovery of the Great Timber Hall, now securely dated to a full millennium before the first stones were raised at Stonehenge, forces us to look deeper. It reveals a lost chapter, a forgotten prequel to the story we thought we knew. This wasn't an evolutionary dead end, it was the work of the ancestors, a sophisticated tradition of monumentality that would lay the social and conceptual groundwork for everything that was to come. This discovery fundamentally reframes the narrative, presenting us not with a linear progression from simple to complex, but with two distinct parallel ages of genius, an age of timber followed by an age of stone. They represent different technological choices, different aesthetic sensibilities, and perhaps even different ways of relating to the world. The tradition of the Timber Hall was one of creating vast, enclosed internal spaces. The builders were masters of carpentry and architecture. Their chosen material, oak, was a living, organic medium that required an intimate understanding of its properties. They worked with the grain, shaping and joining massive beams to create structures that were, in essence, magnificent wooden shells. The human experience of these monuments was focused inward. Life took place inside the hall, gathered around the warmth and light of the central fires, shielded from the outside world. It was architecture designed for the community, for feasting, and for sheltering the social and spiritual life of the people. Its vulnerability was its organic nature. Wood decays, burns, and is reclaimed by the earth, which is why this tradition has remained largely invisible, creating a profound survivor bias in the archaeological record that has, until now, overwhelmingly favored stone. The later age of stone, exemplified by Stonehenge, represents a different philosophy. Here, the focus was on creating open-air ceremonial landscapes. The builders were masters of logistics and astronomy. Their material, stone, was chosen for its permanence, its connection to the very bones of the earth. The engineering challenge was not one of complex joinery, but of quarrying and transporting monoliths of unimaginable weight, sometimes over hundreds of miles. The human experience of these sites was oriented outward, towards the horizon and the cosmos. They were stages for rituals performed under the open sky, their alignments precisely calibrated to the movements of the sun and moon. It was architecture designed to connect humanity with the wider universe. For a long time, there has been an implicit assumption that stone is somehow more advanced than wood. The discovery of the Scottish Hall powerfully challenges this notion. The level of skill required to design and construct a stable, load-bearing structure of this size with a complex pitched roof using only stone tools is a feat of engineering every bit as remarkable as moving megaliths. We're talking about two different kinds of mastery, Professor Finch notes. Arranging the stones of Stonehenge required incredible effort and a deep knowledge of astronomy, but shaping hundreds of unique, irregular oak timbers into a precise, interlocking architectural system requires a form of three-dimensional thinking and carpentry skill that is breathtakingly complex. This wasn't just a building, it was a masterclass in woodworking. To call it primitive is to fundamentally misunderstand their capabilities. Perhaps the most profound implication of this discovery is that the timber tradition was the crucial predecessor to the stone tradition. The Great Hall was not an isolated marvel, it was the culmination of a long history of building in wood. More importantly, the social structures required to build it, the ability to organize labor on a massive scale, to manage resources, to centralize authority, and to foster inter-community collaboration, were in effect the social technology that was perfected during the age of timber. When the cultural focus in Britain began to shift from wood to stone around 3000 BC, the fundamental blueprint for how to achieve a monumental project was already in place. The builders of Stonehenge did not have to invent the concept of a great, centralized ceremonial center, nor did they have to figure out how to marshal a regional workforce for the first time. They were building upon the social foundations established by the hall builders 1,000 years earlier. The great timber halls were the crucibles where the very idea of a monument like Stonehenge became possible. This discovery firmly places Neolithic Scotland not on the periphery of European prehistory, but at its heart, participating in a widespread tradition of monumental timber construction that stretched across the continent. Seen in this light, the later stone circles of Britain are not a sudden, inexplicable leap forward, but a regional evolution of this older timber-based tradition adapted to the unique geology and cultural trajectory of the British Isles. The Great Timber Hall does not diminish the wonder of Stonehenge. Instead, it enriches its story, providing a deep and complex ancestry. It pulls back the curtain on a lost era, revealing that the drive to build, to create a monumental center for the community, is far older and more widespread than we ever imagined. It proves that for 1,000 years before the first Sarsen stone was dragged across the Salisbury Plain, another form of genius was shaping the landscape, leaving behind a legacy not of stone, but of the magnificent ghosts of timber cathedrals, whose echoes are only now being rediscovered. From a fleeting, ghostly image on a radar screen to the full-scale revelation of a magnificent 6,000-year-old monument, the discovery of the Great Timber Hall has taken us on an incredible journey. It has pulled back the curtain on a lost world, revealing not the primitive hunter-gatherers of popular imagination, but a society of sophisticated architects, organized communities, and visionary leaders. It has introduced us to a forgotten age of timber, a monumental tradition that set the stage for the more famous stone circles that would follow. In short, it has fundamentally rewritten the opening chapter of Britain's story. But the most exciting part of this discovery is not what it has told us, but what it promises to reveal. This is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of a whole new chapter in our quest to understand the past. The most tantalizing question that arises from this find is a simple one. If a structure of this magnitude could lie hidden and undisturbed for 60 centuries, what else is out there? Archaeologists are now convinced that the Great Timber Hall is not an anomaly. It is, in all likelihood, merely the tip of a colossal iceberg. It's statistically improbable that a society capable of creating such a monument would build only one. It is far more likely that this was the great cathedral of its region, a central hub in a wider network of smaller halls, settlements, and ceremonial sites that are also lying dormant beneath the soil. This discovery is the proof of concept, the key that unlocks the possibility of a vast, hidden landscape of Neolithic timber architecture stretching across Britain and northern Europe. For millennia, this hidden world has been invisible, its secrets protected by a thin blanket of earth. But we are now entering a golden age of archaeology, armed with revolutionary technologies that are giving us the power to see the invisible. The most powerful of these tools is LiDAR, which stands for Light Detection and Ranging. Operated from drones or aircraft, LiDAR systems fire millions of laser pulses at the ground, measuring the time it takes for them to return. The resulting data can be used to create breathtakingly detailed 3D maps of the terrain, digitally stripping away all vegetation and modern buildings. For the first time, we can see the subtle lumps and bumps, the faint outlines of ancient field systems, burial mounds, and the foundational footprints of long-vanished buildings that are completely invisible to the naked eye. Alongside LiDAR, advances in geophysical survey techniques like ground-penetrating radar, GPR, and magnetometry allow archaeologists to create virtual X-rays of the ground beneath their feet before a single shovel of dirt is moved. These methods detect changes in the soil and buried features, producing detailed maps of potential structures. It was GPR, after all, that first whispered of the Great Hall's existence. This new technological toolkit is transforming archaeology from a discipline of patient digging into one of high-tech remote sensing, allowing researchers to identify and map vast areas with astonishing speed and precision. The future of the Scottish site itself is a hive of planned activity. The initial excavation, as groundbreaking as it was, has only explored a fraction of the monument and its immediate surroundings. The next phase will see the dig expand, as researchers search for evidence of the wider settlement. Were there smaller dwellings clustered around the hall? Were there workshops, defensive palisades, or other smaller ceremonial structures? Each new find will add another layer of detail to the picture of this complex society. Simultaneously, the artifacts and samples already recovered will undergo years of intensive scientific analysis. Advanced isotope analysis on the animal bones can reveal the geology of the areas where the animals grazed, potentially mapping the vast catchment area of the community that gathered at the hall. The emerging field of ancient DNA, aDNA analysis, could extract genetic information from bone fragments or residues on pottery, telling us more about the people themselves, the specific crops they were growing, and the lineage of their livestock. Every fragment of wood, every shard of pottery, every speck of charcoal still holds secrets that cutting-edge science can now unlock. The discovery of the Great Timber Hall is a profound and humbling reminder that the past is not a dead, static thing. It is a dynamic presence, a story that is constantly being retold as new evidence comes to light. It has forced us to discard old, outdated ideas and to embrace a far more complex and impressive vision of our Neolithic ancestors. They were not just survivors, they were innovators. They were not just farmers, they were architects and astronomers. They possessed the social cohesion and the sheer audacity to literally reshape their world, leaving behind a legacy that has humbled and inspired us in the 21st century. History is not a book that has already been written. It is an immense library, and for thousands of years most of its volumes have been buried, and locked away. Now, with new keys in our hands, we are finally beginning to open them. The fields and forests of our modern world are the quiet guardians of countless more secrets, countless more stories waiting to be told. The Great Timber Hall is the first word in a new, incredible sentence. The only question is, what will the rest of it say?